What would change in the world if you, me, and everyone choose to feed the wolf of possibilities instead of the one of doubt, distrust, and despair? The way I see it, our point of view creates reality, not the other way around. Somewhere deep within, I think we know that. In this podcast, I am daring you to claim this remarkable superpower. Join us and be inspired by trackers, explorers, and finders of possibilities from the multiverse of hope. Welcome to the podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities, with your host, Katarina Wallentin. Welcome to this episode of Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities podcast. And my guest today is Max Zoulek. He has a degree in something I cannot even pronounce, so I'm going to ask him to pronounce it later. But he spent the first 20 years trying to fit into this environment and get life right by other people's standards, like a lot of us. And then he started to become a seeker of totally different possibilities, particularly in the area of bodies and food. And that is what we'll dive into today, like the whole area of possibilities with eating and with bodies and with you into that whole paradigm. So today he travels the world with his wife, Shannon O'Hara, who we also have had on here. And he works and facilitates access consciousness in all of these areas and many others as well. And let's go back to the beginning, actually. So you started by doing a 5-year training in this naturopathic. Was that correct?
I'd call it naturopathy in my Australian accent.
And at the end of that, you saying that you were actually the sickest in your whole life, even though you had used all these alternative and medical doctors trying to get you to feel better and get your body healthy again. So what really occurred and how did you find your way out of that?
Well, so much occurred. Because I would say I was seeking before that. I'll start a little bit from before I studied naturopathy.
Yes.
I actually was born in Germany and my family is pretty much full blood German. And when I was 8 years old, we immigrated to Australia. So for me, it was a completely different environment and a completely different headspace. And at 8 years old, what I tried to do from then on was really try to fit in and belong to this different culture, which I enjoyed, but I really felt really different to. So from 8 years on, I was pretty much hardcore doing that, trying to get it right in the way I thought I should get it right. And then after school, I was interested in something different, but then I was following like my parents' path. My mother wanted me to go to university. So I went and did that for 6 months, not very long. And then went to do very hands-on stuff and studied a trade as a fitter and turner. So I was doing a lot of labor and manual work for the next 4 years. And after that, I realized that wasn't for me. That's when I started to go into this alternative side of things. But I was always looking for something different. Always knew something else had to be possible. And I got the confidence up to go to university and study naturopathy. And I thought that was the right thing to do. And that was the right path and the different that I was looking for. So I was trying to get it right with naturopathy and the alternative healing and so forth. And over those 5 years, my health really deteriorated more and more. I also had 2 children, got into a relationship in the second year of that university studies and had 2 children. And, so I had a lot on my plate as well. And I went to doctors, I had blood tests, I had all sorts of things. And I mean, for many years, I was really looking at, okay, what's wrong with me? And it wasn't until 2 years after that when I discovered access consciousness and this different possibility, which essentially had nothing to do with food, but everything to do with awareness, which includes food, that things started to shift for me.
I would like to actually go back to a part where I think a lot of people can recognize themselves, which is where we try for a long time to fit into all the normal and this whole reality, which, we've been trained to do since we're kids. And then when we start seeking, because a lot of people listening to this are most likely seekers of some kind in some area of their life, even whatever that looks like. And this is where I think it's such a key where you did start to go towards what you were looking for, something different, something that could actually
Yeah.
change the path you were on. And then you find yourself there in the training, but then you still you still get sick, and there's still things going on in your life, which it probably always will be. And what I would like to look at is the difference, what happens when you start adding awareness, because my sense is that you still use everything that you learned during those 5 years, and you use it in a different way, which creates more possibilities. So could you talk a little bit about that? How do you use all the information that you as a seeker find in the world when you start adding awareness to it?
So the information, I always found it really interesting, and I was very interested in bodies and health and healing, and definitely more the alternative ways, like the natural ways, using nature, using food, your point of view, creating a reality, that sort of thing. And so I think what I've found, it's not so much the information that I use now, it's a different perspective, maybe. Like all of that is included this because it was very science-based, the course that I did.
Yeah.
So all of the chemistry and the physiology and the pathophysiology and so forth is part of the way I look at things. And I'm always looking for what else as well. And what I changed is that I'm not looking for the right thing anymore, which I was always looking for an answer, and I was always looking for the right thing to try and fix what I've decided is already wrong. So I was starting off in a very wonky direction to begin with, like one that does not lead to health and ease, and ease with your body, ease with food, ease with your life, joy. That wasn't the basis for anything of that. So it was always like finding another problem and looking to the wrongness.
That's what you're saying is so brilliant. So if you look at this, so that is really where a lot of us start. There's something wrong. It could be food, relationship, work. And then we look for an answer for something to fix that. And when you're saying that your perspective changed, so if your perspective instead have started to become, what are the possibilities? What can I add to my life? What can I eat? How can I use food? How can I use moving my body? Whatever that is. But from not a seeking of the answer and a solution to the wrongness, that actually shifts the whole starting point shifts, and your
Totally.
questions come from a completely different space.
I'd love to add one more thing about that starting point, because what I used to do, I wanted to control everything. So control is like a huge, huge aspect of like, we think we want to have control in all these different ways, but in actual matter, we don't really. And it's when we're willing to be out of control more that so much more is actually possible. And with food, it's such an interesting topic, right? Because like how many people look to control through food, because you can't control the external circumstances, but you can control the food that you put into your body. And the different and weird and wonderful ways that we do that and look at that and try to control. And, and then it's so easy to do that because everywhere says this is the right food to eat, this is the wrong food to eat. And then if you keep going down that rabbit hole, you can quite easily then control the diet and the food and that whole reality, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it has very little to do with actual awareness when you do that. But it's the awareness that then when you recognize it's not about eating the right food, it's also about what is your body actually asking for? Because your body is connected to the planet, right? If there wasn't this earth, and I know this might get a little bit esoteric and a bit weird for people, but for me, it's like very actually plain and simple. Like if there was no earth, right, we would not have these bodies. These bodies are very specific to this earth. Like they're made up of all the elements of this earth. What I found is like super relevant with this awareness, rather than looking for the rightness and the wrongness. Like what if it was actually, there was no right and wrong? What if we started from there? And then if your body, like, this reality says 3 meals a day and this size and all these different types of foods, and this is how you have a balanced diet, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what if you actually started with a question to your body and it's like, body, do you actually desire to eat right now? Even just that what we've decided is the body's signal for hunger and the communication for hunger, I've actually found out can break down to a lot more than just my body's hungry and needs food. It can break down to a lot more things, but we've put all of these different things into this one particular feeling And oftentimes it can be a lot of different stuff and awarenesses.
Could you give some examples?
Yes. One example that I found is like even thirst. Like I used to think my body was hungry, and then when I would drink some water, it would completely vanish.
Mm.
And then I might be hungry like an hour or two later for actual food. The other thing that I found is if I didn't want to deal with something, let's say emotionally, or like be aware of something, is what I would actually say that, because it's not just our emotions, it's like a lot of, we have so much awareness, like we are so aware of so much that if there was something I wasn't willing to be aware of, I would eat something to create like this fullness sensation. So the awareness would be less prominent.
Mm.
So I would sense the awareness less. And I think this is actually a very common thing for a lot of people is, and that's why we see so much overeating, first of all, because we have the resources in the first world countries. And there's a lot of stuff that people don't want to be aware of, basically.
Eating and food to cut off the edge of our awareness, or even to dull it down in that way.
Exactly. So if we had like that, and I like how you said like that edge of awareness, which most people would probably call uncomfortable, but it's more so that it's unfamiliar. I would say like we're not familiar with the sense. And if we're not asking a question and we just sort of want it to like go away, then food is one of the ways. And I mean, there's a lot of different addictions. People do it with drugs. People do it with judgment. People do it with thinking. People do it with alcohol. People do it with talking to friends or whatever. You know, it's like can always, or loud music and TV in the background and having noise around. That sort of dulls out the awareness too. So there's a trillion different things that people use to dull out the awareness. And food is one of those. So when you start with a question of like, is my body actually hungry? You kind of, and you're willing to find out something different, you know, and willing to have like a different possibility, you can actually find out so much more about what your body is actually asking for than, oh, food, like the single one thing that most people go through from that sensation.
Well, it is interesting because even I can perceive that since you were able to change the state your body was in at the time when you were, experiencing your body as sick, there's even a wish in me to ask you, so how did you get from there to here? Which is really me wondering or looking for the answer. Like, can you give me
right.
the recipe?
Yeah. Give me the pathway.
Yeah. Can you? So instead, if I asked you for like can you give us three of the main tools that you've been using since you really came into contact with Access to shift the way you be with your body, with food and eating?
Cool, totally. I would say there's definitely a lot of tools. And I'll start with an awareness to begin with. And it was just like the awareness of that I was actually aware, because I always thought everything that I was aware of either was my problem or I was wrong for being aware of it. So I did all sorts of things. And one of my other main things, besides like food stuff, was like thinking. So always going into thoughts and reasons and justifications and doing like somersaults in my head to try and avoid the awareness that's actually there. So just literally, okay, so one tool that relates to that is who does it belong to? So when I was either doing a lot of thinking or aware of stuff, then like asking the question of, okay, who does this actually belong to? Any thought or feeling or emotion that I was having, asking who does this actually belong to? And that oftentimes would give me this space of awareness of and recognition of like, oh, even if I didn't know who exactly it came from or what exactly the thing was, I could still have had this sense of like, it would get like more spacious and lighter if it actually wasn't mine. I'd go like, who does this belong to? And I'm like, oh, it's not mine. Like there would just be like this space and recognition, not all of the time, right?
So
and especially when I started Access, it was sort of like, I was very much in the I don't know universe.
That would even include then, for example, who does this desire for this particular food belong to, or who does this sense
totally,
of wrong with body belong to? Like it goes quite wide, correct?
Wide and deep and broad in 360 degrees, spherical. Yeah. Exactly. And so that was a huge one for me because I literally made myself wrong for everything I was aware of beforehand. I was like desperately trying to fit in rather than be me and have the awareness that I have and be willing to be as different as I be, no matter what that looks like. And that I think is a huge step for anyone, is to the willingness to be themselves. And I'm by no means saying that I'm there, and I'm by no means saying there is an arrival point. It's like it's a continuing creation, and this is something that Katarina is like, when we've spoken in the past, like you've really pointed out to me too, and like it's being you is a continuous creation.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's really stuck with me as well. And
And
whenever we're looking for a full stop or an answer or like a resolution or a conclusion, like it's never, what I found, it's never true. Like there is no such thing as the right food. There is no such thing as the right amount of food or anything.
Well,
like
that could even be one of the tools, because if you look at that and we look at, so being you with food, for example, we take that as one part.
Yeah.
The continuous creation as well. So how you be and what you like for food, or what your body craves or desires or requires for food, will be a continuous creation. It will actually shift and change, because what I see is that a lot of people decide, this is what I like to eat. This is what my body requires to eat. This is the diet I'm going to follow forever to eternity, and then everything will be fine. Instead of the continuous creation of how you be with food, which really includes a continuous question every day, and things will shift and change as your body and your being, and like you say, the earth shifts and change continuously.
Exactly, because nothing in nature, and nature I think is a lot more true, because it's not a conceptual unit. Like we have a lot of concepts about different things, including food, and like what the good food is and the right food and the bad foods, like a lot of concepts. But nature is a lot more, I think, true to what actually works. And there is no stasis, like nothing just stops in nature. Everything is continually evolving and creating. And if an animal doesn't create its life continuously and is aware continuously, it dies. And we've created a human system, I guess, and structure where that doesn't necessarily happen, like we're supported in a different sort of sense. But I wanted to broaden it a little bit about the thing of food that you were mentioning then. It's like, and it's also the creation of your life. And this is one of the massive things that really shifted for me, because for me now, I don't have, I'll give you a bit of perspective. Back when I was finishing naturopathy, and for the next 2 years after that, I was like, I had super low energy, which is really difficult when you're trying to support a family with 2 young kids. And, I was finishing my studies, and then I was building a house and all these different things. So super low energy, and like my digestive system was always having issues. And like I was dreading eating food basically at every meal, because I would either feel like super tired afterwards, or I'd have like these different symptoms come up all the time. Like I wouldn't tolerate different foods, and I was always trying to eliminate foods, and like, what can't I eat, and all that sort of stuff. But so that's where I came from basically. And now I have what I would say is like a super freedom with food. The only thing that I know my body doesn't like to eat is gluten or wheat, so I basically eat a gluten-free diet, but anything and everything else. What really, really shifted that for me was the creation of my life. And this is way beyond food. Yes. And like it started with the thing of like the awareness that I was aware, and the willingness to be me, no matter what that looked like. And there's this like element of like potency. And now I would also say it's like a joy, actually. And this is what I was like really avoiding beforehand too, is being joyful, because you can't control joy, right? So I was pretty serious about everything and trying to figure it out and get it right and have the right answer. And that was pretty much my life at the time. And the willingness to then be more out of control and ask for what's actually joyful for me. So all these different elements that we're talking about, and I'm pretty sure like all of these podcasts that Katarina is doing is going to be all about the creation of your life and the discovery of the continued creation and discovery of that. Yeah. And that's absolutely what shifted things for me, is the willingness to use these tools and then actually create my life continuously. Because always trying to cut things out and always like do and be less and create this stasis so things wouldn't change and get worse.
Well, it's funny because it actually goes back to when we were talking about the shift of the perspective from looking for what's wrong, because when if you're continuously looking for what's wrong and what can fix it. Your perspective is very small and limited and focused on what's wrong, which then like will create your reality, your point of view. Something is wrong, I have to fix it, will be your reality. And when you start creating your life, this becomes one part of it. But in general, you're starting to look at what are the possibilities here? What can I create here? And then the food and eating and whatever is going on with your body that may be uncomfortable, it is just one part of this much bigger world that you are suddenly moving and creating in.
Yeah. And another very interesting piece, if your head is not spinning by now, this thing of like the wrong, how we look at like the wrongness and the problems, for me, that was actually based in the rightness, like trying to get it right and be right in this reality and perfect and all those sort of things. But then, so underneath all of the wrongness was actually this.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I have really, really had to change and continue to change, because I still do it, is the thing of trying to be right. And rightness is, and this is something that Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, says, is that when we do rightness, it's actually much more dangerous than when we do wrongness with something. Because when we believe we have something right, like we believe we have it right, and we're not actually looking to change any of that. But it's actually far more deadly to the creation of our lives when we think we have something right than when we have something wrong. We're actually looking for we're actually willing to like look for something different when we think something is wrong, but not when we're right. Then it's like, nope, I have that right.
It's so true. It's like we check it off. I have that right. Okay, I'll put that over here because I got that right. So that's check on the list. That could also be one of the reasons, and Dane talks a lot about this, one of the other co-founders of Access Consciousness, how we actually continuously create something wrong so that we will keep seeking. It's like our excuse for looking for possibilities is that something has to be wrong that we can fix. So what would it be like if we started to just create our lives without having to have the excuse that something is wrong and not right?
Exactly. And the whole concept of right and wrong.
Yes.
I mean, if we just put that aside and then we go, okay, what would I actually like to create here? What would be actually like fun? Like what's working, what's not working, and what would I actually like?
And even the fun part is it's looked upon, nearly frowned upon. Like, so if we go back to the food and eating, if we really ate what was fun to eat in that moment, what would that create? But fun, it's like the least valued parameter for what you will choose.
It's very childish,
What's fun for me?
You can't control fun.
No. So it's really like, what if eating was based on what actually had the energy of joy and fun? And what would that be like?
Yeah. And what are you actually eating for is a question I would ask too. Like, are you eating to create like a sense of fullness, or are you eating to actually like have a pleasurable and joyful experience of your body?
That's a great tool too. What are you actually eating for?
Yeah. Because a lot of us too, Katarina and my wife Shannon, they're doing a call over 4 months right now, every week for half an hour, called Body Magic Weekly, which is brilliant, of all sorts of different things. And they invited me to do a 1 hour talk just a few days ago. And one of the most interesting things that I found from that was like the question of what are you eating for? And like with several people on that call, they were like eating for their mom, or they were eating for their father, or they were like eating for this other person. And like since childhood, and they're in their 40s or 50s, and like literally had this huge realization with tears to be like, wow, I had no idea that I was actually eating to please these people. And we do these strange things with food and so many other areas of our life that unless we're asking a question, we don't really get to that weird non-cognitive place where we've chosen this from, which might have actually come from like a total caring for that person.
And it starts when we're very young. Like if we look at all of that, like, our parents really likes us to eat, to, grow strong. And like, if you go very basic, that's like their job, make sure the kids in the way they've been taught that by their parents. And I know that a lot of, for example, relationships with mothers is connected to eating her food and enjoying it, which gives her pleasure because then she feels like she actually provided you with a really good meal. And somehow that makes her feel really right as a mom and a cook. And
Yeah.
all of that we talked about is goes into us and gets ingrained in us. And if we don't ask questions, then we're actually trying to still fulfill, even though our mom may be dead.
For the last 30 years.
Yeah. And the need to actually provide that joy of the rightness that we would give somebody if we eat properly enough, their food, all of that. So that is such a good point. Who are you eating for and what are you eating for?
And oftentimes food is really linked with caring as well. Like you said, like people, especially of the older generations, for them being able to provide and cook and for their family was this real contribution and caring. But when it's mixed with these other points of views too, that like you have to eat, otherwise you're not receiving that caring, and then therefore you're invalidating them, is like this whole other thing that gets mixed with it. And that's where the people that I was talking about from the call, is that where they were really stuck, is because they didn't want to invalidate their parents' point of view of what caring was. And like, what if true caring was actually, hey, you have these choices. What would you actually like to choose? Like what if true caring was actually your parents asking, hey, what is your body hungry right now? Would you actually like to eat this? What do you like to eat? Questions to actually discover more about your own body rather than this is what you should do and eat.
And it is interesting in the way that what you're saying, it gets sticky for us with food when the different points of views, projections, expectations, judgments gets mixed. Mainly, I would say that today, if I get a meal that is cooked by somebody with total caring, independent of what that meal is, like somebody who really loves cooking and who would like to, nearly like give me an experience of food or the joy of food, then I truly enjoy that. And I can perceive my whole body enjoying that food. And it comes with this energy of nurturing and contribution. And that is probably the initial energy that also exists, I think, with parents feeding their kids, if we look at it. And then that energy that exists in at least some families then gets mixed with all these other things, that projections, expectations, and all the points of views and what you're supposed to be for your kids and not, all of that, all of it gets mixed in this that we then carry with us for the rest of our lives. So that's where we go back to that being you, creating you with food, for example, and where you are the question of, okay, if I'm being me, what would I like to eat? And how would I like my food prepared? And, in what way would I like to enjoy it? So yeah, absolutely. All of that. So that question of being willing to look at what's true for you is really a key, it seems like.
Yeah. And what's true for your body too, because your body has its own point of view as well, like there is the being, which is you, and then there's the body. And that was actually quite a revelation for me too when I started Access Consciousness, because with naturopathy, it's always, well, I guess it's very, they're looking at it from a different point of view, which is sort of a very science reductionist point of view. But for me, it really helped to recognize, hey, like there's all these things that have to do with our body. Like money is one of those. We only require money to do anything like for our body. If you didn't have a body, money would be completely irrelevant. So things like traveling, you're moving your body around, that costs money. Food costs money because you're feeding your body. Housing costs money because you're, providing shelter for your body. So your body has its own unique set of requirements. And what if you actually found out what was actually true for your body, rather than like what everybody says should be or is or so forth? And for me, that was a real revelation, because I could actually communicate and receive a lot more information and communication from my body, rather than be like, oh, it's all sort of like mixed and interlinked, like I am my body. It was a really different perspective for me, which never really gave me the clarity. So that's something that might help people as well, is to recognize that their body has its own very unique point of view about things. And it might actually like something that you've decided that you don't like to eat.
And that's a great third tool, actually. If we go back to, I asked for 3 tools and we've been
Yeah.
exploring them in depth, but that is a really brilliant third tool. The fact that your body it's not necessarily the same as your being, and your body has things that it desires and requires that you need to ask your body about, that you actually starting this conversation with your body and learning what way it communicates with you, because it's not necessarily voices in your head. It will show you what it requires and desires in all kinds of different ways. Do you have any example of how your body have shown you what it would desires and requires that made you surprised?
Good question.
Or something recently?
I mean, it continues to surprise me all the time. The thing is, like, as I change as well, my body changes too. Like with this, I'm going to refer to this call again because it was actually really big for me too. On Body Magic Weekly, there was something that really shifted in my universe about caring, and I guess that's why I'm mentioning it on this podcast as well, because it is such a huge element of interacting with our bodies, being with our bodies, creating our bodies. So since that call too, things around food have been really different, and just how my body feels is completely different. Like there's so much more peace and ease with my body than I had beforehand even. And I already thought I had a lot of peace and ease with my body, you know.
How does your body communicate with you, would you say? Is it the sense of ease and
Right.
peace? Is that
Right.
one of the ways your body communicates?
Yes. And if it is sort of communicating loudly, then there is less peace and ease, I would say. Gosh, that's really interesting. I'm not really getting a particular.
Well, and what if that's actually a great piece of information? So everywhere where we're looking for a very particular way that our body communicates, and then we will know that, which is really an answer to how your body communicates. Again,
Yeah.
so I think the key again to communicating with your body and having conversations with your body is it won't look like it does when you have conversations with your friend or your kid or your mom or your dad. It will look
It's much less cognitive, at
much
least.
more cognitive and subtle. So
Yeah.
one thing that I would say that I also have with my body, if I have ease and peace in my body, then that's a great direction to keep moving. And then my body will get uncomfortable or show me something. And then I have to start asking even more questions around that and see if I can kind of find out what's going on. So that's a really good practice to even start looking for these different ways that your body communicates with you. And sometimes it screams. That's when you get sick or have really pain or intensity somewhere. That's when your body is trying to get your attention. So that's also
And
something to start.
I would call that the sledgehammer of awareness.
Yes.
Because our body's always giving us like a feather touch of awareness to begin with, and then it gets sort of louder and louder and louder until it's a sledgehammer of awareness. And there's nothing wrong about that either. Like sometimes it just takes us quite a while to become aware of something, you know.
And I find that one of the greatest way that I keep increasing my communication with the body is I actually thank it for awareness, even the sledgehammer ones.
Yeah,
So the
exactly.
willingness to really go, okay, thank you for, making me aware of something is going on here and what is it? So that being in the question, but again, it goes away from, it's not about trying to find the answer for what's wrong. It's really about looking for, okay, the awareness of what's going on, and then what's the possibility here that I haven't yet discovered or acknowledged or explored.
Like something that's really actually helped me, and this has taken me a lot of years of access consciousness and using the tools and such, because I'm a very heady head tripper, basically. Like I used to think myself out of or into a wet paper bag. I don't know really which one, but something strange that didn't really work. Like, for example, if there was like, I had several different pieces of food or something on the bench, then I basically just like lower my walls and barriers, like everything, all my, in my head and my body and stuff, and just sort of like push all that down, and then just ask, okay, body, which one, like, what would you actually like? And have no point of view about like what I should eat or all that sort of stuff, and what's good for you and what's bad for you. That what I found has been the most effective is really just like not thinking about it and just like going with the energy of what my body is like. Yes. And the thing is, as you practice these things, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the more it actually, the stronger it becomes, the more agile it becomes, the more mobile and dexterous it becomes. It's exactly the same thing. The more you ask questions, and if you haven't done this before, give it at least 3 months, like try it out continuously for 3 months, and then look back and see if anything's changed. That would be really my recommendation, because it takes a while to build that muscle, and then it continues to grow and get more dexterous.
So I think that's where we will end today with this invitation for a home play from Max, where you can play with this, asking your body what it would like to eat. If you didn't have to think about if it's good for you, right for you, wrong for you, bad for you, what would your body like to eat? And then also maybe re-listen and use some of the other tools that we've been talking about for the next 3 months and see what occurs. What kind of relationship with your body can you create? And Max, if they would like to do more with you, where do they find you, or how do they find you?
Yes, they can find me on the accessconsciousness.com website if they search under facilitators, Max Zoulek, or they can go to the maxzoulek.com website. So it's ZOULEK.
So you can go there and check out more about all kinds of things with Max, including food and bodies and consciousness and possibilities, as we've been talking about here. So
and it's really important, I think, that nobody has fun with their body, because fun with the body is really, really bad. It may lead to dancing or something like that.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, really, during 3 months when you do this home play, don't have any fun. Don't play with it, and just keep it very, very serious. That's what all your body's
very important.
Very, very important, guys, at the end of this podcast. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you so much, Kat.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. I hope you have more space in your world now. If you would like to listen to earlier episodes, share with other people, or subscribe, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or visit katarinawallentin.com/wolf.